I didn't see you there. I still don't see you there because the stream is taking a long time to start. Alright, now I can see you there. Let's go tell the world that we're streaming. Probably struggling with animations or something. Paste. That's not the right link. There you are. So, recently I've been thinking a lot about cameras. And how they affect gameplay and how the main character affects gameplay and all sorts of stuff like that. But rather than do those videos, I came here to stream. I'm not sure why, because I think those videos are probably more interesting. Still, we'll let my brain cook a little bit. Now, in the last episode, we were bullheadedly trying to animate cutscenes using Unity's built-in animation system, which is terrible for that. And we'd run into this problem where player has an animator on it, so we can't actually click on it when we want to animate things. So in order for that to work, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create an empty object called player. And then we're going to put it on the outside of player, like this. Because the way that animations work is they actually use names. So once we put the player back in as the primary, we shouldn't have any problems with setting it up. The only issue we're going to have with this setup here is that the animations in question are going to have to be relative to the world, not relative to the player. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does mean that we are going to have to come up with a way for the octopus to grab the player in a very specific spot. And one option is we can have the octopus animation not have any positioning in it at first, and then we can use a controller maybe to switch to a different animation. Let's try that. We'll see whether it works. So here's our level 1 octograb that we couldn't record before. What we're going to do is hit record now. Boom. And we shouldn't have any problem recording it now because it's no longer going to be taking the player out of things. So what we'll do is we'll simply move the player a little bit so that we get an idea of whether or not this is working. I think that is technically the buddy, not the player. There's the player over here. So just to do some testing, we're going to drag the player up a little bit, and then we will animate them going up into the sky. Wah! And you can see that animated fine. So if you take a look, you can see how it says player position. As long as our final object has the player position in it, we should be able to animate it even if it's not the same object, because the animations reference names. So that's how we're going to get around that. It's not really a very good way to get around it, but it is a way. So the next step for what we're going to do is we are going to delete that because we don't need it. And we are going to instead animate the octopus. So the way that this works is we simply turn the octopus on. But the problem here is that the octopus is not in a position relative to the player. It's just somewhere in the level. So even if we turn the octopus on, we're going to have to turn on a player tracking element so that the octopus tentacle will try and find the player. That looks pretty small. I wonder whether or not there is a scaling factor. No, I guess it's probably correct. Anyhow, once we turn the octopus arm on, it's quite possible for us to do all sorts of complicated things like animate it and all that jazz. But in this case, I think that the only thing I want to do is bring it up from the deep. So we're going to just go here and push it up and spin it. So what that should do is it should just pull the octopus up out of the depths. I think we're going to have to do this algorithmically. I'm trying to think about how this would work, and there's just too many moving pieces. Even if I could use a cutscene of some variety, we would still have to position the player in a very specific place. So there you can see the octopus arm just kind of doing its thing. So I think what we need to do is we need to have 2 animation systems for the octopus arm. Right now we've only got 1. So first off, let's go ahead and delete the animator, or just delete these elements, I guess, for now. We'll come back to it later if we need it. But the problem here is that the octopus arm only has this tentacle script. And the tentacle script is for grabbing. It doesn't do anything else, which means that that it's going to basically teleport into position rather than anything else. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a pre-animation. And basically what we're going to want is to create 2 basic animation methods. One is going to be the grab that we already have, and the other is going to be a reach. And the idea is that the reach will lerp towards the correct position, and the grab will then take over once it's very close. So to do that, all we need to do is have 2 different animations. You can see we got this one called wrap. That's actually the animation. That just moves the bones into the correct spot. There's no lerping or anything like that. So we're going to go ahead and just create some code regions. I think it's just hashtag region. And what that'll do is it'll just allow us to keep things a little bit clean. But what I don't like is that I can't seem to shrink it, which implies that's not it. Maybe, is it code region? No? Maybe I haven't ever tried to do this in this IDE. Maybe this IDE doesn't actually understand this. That would be a shame. Yeah, I don't see any signs one way or the other. It doesn't really matter. We'll keep it for now. As long as it's not causing errors, it's more or less correct. So basically, if we take a look at how wrap works, the first thing it does is it moves the bones that are below the grab point. It determines the grab point first. Then it moves the bones that are below the grab point, and then it moves the grab point to be in the right spot to grab. What that means is that it will adjust all of the things that happen below the grab before attempting to figure out where the tentacle is supposed to be. Then it will move the tentacle, and all of the bones that are above the grab will wrap. Yeah, it's strange, Better Ninja, because you'd think that this IDE... Oh, it does now. Okay, so it just took 15 or 20 minutes before it figured out that it was something that existed. That's fine. And then all the bones above the grab point will wrap properly. We need to do the same thing when we're traveling, but basically what happens is if we determine that the grab point is too far from our destination, what we'll do is we will move the entire tentacle into position such that the grab point is moving slowly towards the player or towards the destination. Problem is that we want to make sure that it feels kind of natural. I think that what we'll do is we'll start with the same underbone setup, the same core bones below the grab point, and then we'll just animate the tips different so that we get kind of a sinuous, like pushing through water sort of feel. And so to do that, we're going to want to take some of these values and turn them into a function. Bend lower tentacle. And we need to pass it the lowest active bone and the bone overage. There we are. So then we just grab this, and cut it. Public void bend lower tentacle. It needs to be a float. Bend lower tentacle. int lowest active bone, float bone overage. So the lowest active bone is the grab point, and the bone overage is how far along the bone we are, so that there's no sudden jerks when we put the next bone on. And then we're just going to return angle here. And that will give us the angle that we need to worry about relative to the final value here. Because this coil command is the actual active touch point bone. And it's important that that has an understanding of how far it's supposed to be bent by default versus how far it's supposed to be bent as a grab. And that's what the bone overage does. It determines that percent. So this is all pretty basic. I think that we're going to want to put this into it as well. Determine bones. Determine active bones. Find active bone. And then we do out, and it's going to be int possible bones, and out in a float bone overage. And that's just going to be this here. Just grab it and cut it. Oh, there's a lowest active bone int. It's not possible bones, it's lowest active bone. That's fine. So then we're just going to cut this. Pow. And the basic idea is that we don't need to define these because they're already defined. So there are other ways to do it besides using double outs. I think some versions of C# do allow for returning tuples. Let's just do a quick check and see whether or not that's the case. It seems that that should be working, so let's go ahead and try that. Let's use the tuple setup, with the idea here being that if we do this, we don't need to use the out commands. We can just return the tuple. Like that. Which is a much cleaner setup for me. That's how I like it. So, you know. I'm not sure why region decided it needed to be tabbed in. That's incorrect, but whatever. So here you can see that what we need to do is get the lowest active bone of the bone average. So int lowest active bone, float bone average. And then I believe that we can just call the function with those as part of the tuple. But I'm not 100% sure because it's C#. Oh, overage, not average, my bad. There we go. Let's just make sure that that actually compiles, because there are some times when the IDE thinks it's one way and Unity thinks it's another way. Yeah, that seems to have worked fine. So basically what we've done is we've set up some very, very primitive methods for setting up this lower tentacle element, because we're going to repeat these exact same elements later on when we're searching. So we're just going to grab these and copy them. We'll go ahead and copy that too for now. And these are going to be okay, so theoretically, this does understand regions, but it thinks that the tabs are supposed to be... So it thinks they're supposed to be like this. It clearly thinks that. That's not the case. Regions are not part of the class. They're IDE meta tags. They shouldn't be indented. Well, whatever. Minor issues. So basically what we do is we set up the tentacle properly, and now that we've set the tentacle up, Now we have to move towards the player and wiggle. So to do that, we are going to lerp towards the correct position. If we take a look at how we normally do lerping, we get this value set here. And you can see that we just set it like so. So we're going to go ahead and copy paste that. But instead of setting it, we are going to lerp it. We're going to just do a... well, that's kind of a strange way to do it. I wonder why I did it that way. It doesn't matter. Just do a delta times equals time.delta time. I don't know, times something like speed. And we'll just define move speed here. So the basic idea here is that we don't want the tentacle to... So this is going to look weird because the tentacle is oriented vertically. And so if it's significantly off from your vertical position, it will actually strangely drift along beneath you. We'll have to deal with that later, though. Anyway, if we're going to try to lerp it. Now we need to make the tips. We need to make the tip wiggle. So this is a little bit of a challenge because the way that we do this is we only have the tip coiling away here. This part does not exist because our lowest active bone is equal to the tip bones. So this is only happening when our grip is at 0. And therefore there shouldn't be any gripping bones. There's only the tip bones. But here's the thing. We could just copy this. And this is, at this point, it's so similar to the original that it could just be a Boolean toggle rather than being its own function. Let's just make a note of that. There, just so we don't forget. And the problem here is that we're not going to get any animation out of it because none of these things are changing from frame to frame. The only thing that's changing from frame to frame is the motion of the tentacle itself, which isn't really what we want. So what we need to do is determine a range from our ideal location, and that will allow us to wiggle. So here is where we determine our ideal location, this delta, target position minus the lowest point. So we're going to go ahead and get a float range equals delta.magnitude. Move this up here. So basically what we're going to try and do is change the animation based on the range. And so when we make this tip bone wiggle, what we're going to want to do is use the range, but a modified version of it. So we're going to say range equals range divided by 5 percentage 1. And what that'll do is it'll give us a number between 0 and 1 that repeats over and over and over. The only problem is that we don't actually need a value between 0 and 1 that repeats. We want a value between 0 and 1 that ping-pongs. So to smooth the ends off, we are going to take everything above 0.5 and turn it into below 0.5. So it goes from 0 to 0.5 back down to 0 to 0.5. What is it? 1 minus 0.5f. That should work. And then we just say range times equals 2. There we are. So now we've got a ping pong between 0 and 1 that takes place over the course of 5 meters. So with that in mind, what we can do is we can multiply this angle by some value. We want this to be negative 15 at 0. But we're okay with it being other values besides when it's not at 0. We want it to zoom in towards negative 15. And therefore we're going to say negative 15 plus 30 times range. And that will allow us to get kind of a wiggle. And it's just going to be really weird looking, but it's just our first try, so it should be fine, right? Up here, down here in update, what we're going to do is we're going to say if grabbedness equals 0, otherwise do this. So basically the problem here is that we want to be able to tell whether or not we are close enough to being able to do the grab. So if we wanted to check that, we're going to have to do this here. But this involves a lot of extra elements, so we're going to have to do all of this here in the scene. There's really no way around it. We could cache them or something, but it shouldn't matter. So Monk of Time, what we're doing here is we're taking a value that goes from 0 to 1, and then it repeats back down to 0 and goes back up to 1, and down to 0 and back up to 1. Here we say if it's above 0.5, then it equals 1 minus... Oh, I'm sorry. It should be 1 minus range. You caught that. Good. You were right. It went up to 0.5 and then stopped at 0.5 for quite a while. Now it should properly ping pong. I just typed it wrong. Thanks for catching that. So down here, what we're needing to do is check whether or not we're close by. If delta dot magnitude is greater than, say, 0.3, then we want to travel. And this won't be an else, it'll just be an absolute. All right. So the only other thing we need to worry about here is, I guess that's fine. It should be fine. So let's go back over into Unity. Let that recompile. You're not going to recompile? You're happy without being recompiled? All right. So we're going to go ahead and move the player back out. We don't need the proxy object anymore. And we'll move this into the deep. There we go. So there's the tentacle, and when I hit play, you should see it move towards the player. Or not. Oh, that's right. Hold on. There we are. See that? That wasn't actually too bad, was it? So what we're going to do now is we are going to move the octopus arm into the depths a little bit because it's kind of right now in the middle of nothing. So we'll just move it over here. We're going to drop the speed down to 3. 5 meters a second was a little fast. Where is it? Oh, I forgot to turn it on. So you can see that it really doesn't feel very realistic coming out of the dark like that because it doesn't flail or anything of this sort. So because of that, we are going to struggle with getting it to the right position. I think what we'll do is we will move the bones twice. So what we're going to do is we're going to do set bone rot A, and then we're going to, what's this? What's this? That's not how set bone rot works. It should just take a quaternion, not a boolean. You got to be careful. Sometimes you cut and paste your code and it ends up just garbage. Yeah, that's an equal sign. What idiot designed this? Let's just make sure that we don't have the same problem. Yeah, so there's not even an error there. It should say, hey, dude, a Boolean is not a quaternion, but it didn't say that. How strange. Anyway, this is actually what we do want down here. And we're going to add in a quaternion angle axis. And it's going to be an angle of range times random.value. I believe that random.value is valid. I can't remember. And then we'll just do a vector3.right for now, or up. We'll just do 5 times range. And that should make it just kind of jitter. Let's find out. It's not going to work the way I want it to work because of the way there are some constraints. It's not keeping track of where it was last frame. Yeah, see how it jitters? That's obviously wrong. So what we need to do is make it not jitter. The easiest way to do that is to use noise. So here's our noise module in the particle system. Here's our fractal noise. Here's noise. And you can see that we can ask for noise here. P noise, an S noise. I don't know. This is probably cellular noise. I don't know what these noises look like. Presumably P noise is fine. But why does it take in floats? Like multiple floats? There's something wrong with this. Is that a new thing? I don't remember it. We should have our own noise set up separate from this. Did I not import it? I bet I didn't import it. What a pain. So we don't want the jitter. We want it to move smoothly, and the way I was going to have that happen is use a world noise coordinate. But unfortunately for us, we don't appear to have a world noise coordinate. Let's go ahead and look it up. Unity.mathematics.noise. Class noise. Wow, the definitions are incredibly unhelpful. There's literally no English. It just tells you exactly what the tooltips told you. Who didn't even bother to write descriptions for the noise category, the noise class? It's really worthless. Look. Ooh, how helpful. Look at that wonderfully filled out description section. Super useful, guys. Thanks. Well, the other option is to get my old school noise class that I've been using for quite a while. Let's go ahead and try that because I know that works and this is crap. So I'm going to switch you over to Phoenix Write while I figure all of this out because it involves digging it up out of the file system somewhere. And you know, you don't want to look at my various kludgy directories. So where are you? Noise shader, Perlin noise. Assets, Perlin.cs. That's the one. Let's go ahead and drop that into our project. Thank you for deciding now you're going to recompile. There we are. And then we'll come down here into scripts, helper, Perlin.cs. All right. Namespace, global namespace already contains it. So I actually already did import it. I just got the name wrong. So we'll delete it. Then we'll bring you back. Wasn't that wonderful? I just wasted everybody's time because it already existed. It just wasn't called noise. It was called Perlin. That's fine. So here we've got fboom, and we've got noise. I actually don't know what fboom means. And for some reason, they still haven't fixed this issue. It's just mind-boggling how stupid this is. Why would you ever want this to happen? I already complained about it, and they say they're going to fix it. But that was months ago. It's like pretty basic. I'm not sure why you're having such a hard time fixing it. Anyway, it's going to be bones. I can't spell anymore. Dot position. So instead of random.value, we're going to be using that. That should give us a sort of sinuous pulsing. Let's find out. Well, I mean, they responded. Writer can't afford to just sit on their ass like Unity does. Writer is attempting to fight against a free community IDE that comes packaged with Unity. So they're pretty responsive. But man, in this case, like I actually got a response where they said they were working on fixing it and that it had a dedicated, tracking entry, and they can't be bothered to fix it. It's not a complicated issue, guys. If you've got multiple menus, check and see whether or not they're overlapping. Or at least put one of them in the front. So that was still pretty vibraty. And I think the problem there is that the meters are very, very large. So what we're going to do is we are actually going to move the position much, much smaller. Oh, thank you. That was so helpful. So that'll give it a much softer sort of setup. We also want it to be a little bit less. We'll do that in a minute. Wow, it's still very vibraty. So let's bring the octopus speed down considerably so we can watch it happen. Okay, so I think what the problem here is that range isn't actually the value we want. We have range here where we take this range and we figure it out. What we're going to want to do is keep the raw range and come up with another one. We'll call it ping pong because that's what it does. There we are. And then down here we will use, I guess we're not ever going to have to use it as a ping pong, are we? We'll deal with that in a minute here. So we'll just go ahead and say range equals mathf.max, range and 5. And then we'll just down here use that and no multiply by 5. The Relin says, shouldn't you divide with a float instead of an int? That shouldn't matter. It should automatically cast. But we'll take a look. It's possible that that's a problem. The way that C# casts to ints is really aggressive, but it shouldn't happen in that particular case. Oh, that's getting pretty close. However, it didn't really end up in the right spot, did it? So the problem here is that as it approaches 0, it does not get close enough for it to trigger the grab. And that's because we were twisting the bones after we move it. And because of that, we're ending up moving it away from the grab location. And so that's really the reason that we wanted to move this range to a lower value. We're going to go ahead and do a range divided by 2 on that, or range times 2, range divided by 2. And that should have the distance between the calculated position and the real position. Oh, it's not helping. So the core issue here is that we are moving the bones after we've set the position. No, this is ping pong. We don't use it anymore. Did I get this backwards? I got it backwards. I'm just an idiot. No, wait. Sorry, I'm thinking too hard and I'm screwing things up. So, this should be a min. That should keep it from flailing. And then we'll have a 0 and a range -2. And that should keep it from moving at all when it's within 2 meters. And the result should be pretty decent. Let's find out. So that final grab starts really, really slowly because we're lerping. So rather than lerping, we're going to use a move to. So here's where we do our lerping, right here. We actually want to do a move to instead. So we're going to go ahead and set that up with a max. So if range is greater than 1, then range dot normalized. Range equals. Then delta equals delta dot normalized. That'll make it so that we don't move based on how far away we are unless it's below a meter. In actuality, we're going to go ahead and make this like. Let's just make it normalized. And that way it's a move to instead of a lerp. And that should be a little bit less like approach and then stop, because the lerping is definitely kind of an approach and then stop sort of animation. It's much, much slower now because it's no longer playing at full speed the whole time. It's now playing at the slowest speed all the time. So we're going to just increase that speed right back up. That should be 5 meters a second, which should be pretty noticeable. Where are you, my tentacle friend? There you are. So you can see how it is moving, but it is really pretty primitive. So what we're going to do is we're going to want to fix that. Also, that's a strangely like horizontal grab, isn't it? And the problem there is that our tension is really, really high. So we're going to just introduce a little bit less slack into that so it's not quite as noticeable. And then down here what we're going to do is we're going to multiply this by something big, like 5. And we're going to reduce this down to a 2. That way we should get the sense that it's pushing its way through the water because it's using a world position coordinate for the noise. So as it moves through that position, it should get a little bit more noticeable. Probably going to end up using a speed of like 10 or 15, but I want to see it. So it's not... It's not working, and I think that the problem here is simply that the let's go ahead and set this up a little bit differently. No, that's fine. I think it's simply that this is not the right kind of rotation for us. Let's go ahead and change it out for a vector 3.right just to see what happens. And let's move the octopus up just a couple of meters so that we can see it more immediately instead of having to wait. You see, it's not really oriented at us at all. Yeah, that's what I was worried about. It's kind of not how I want it to be. Now, we are seeing it with unusual clarity because we are in the middle of a place that's supposed to be quite dark, and instead it is quite well lit because we're kind of skipping the dark part. But the issue here is pretty clear. It's not really moving towards the player in a way that feels realistic. So if we take the delta between the grab point and the origin of the tentacle, we will have a line along the tentacle. We could take any bone. It could be the tip bone. So if we lerp towards that line being along the vector, we might be able to get it to feel a little more realistic. But really the issue here is, I'm going to have to think about it. I don't want to have to build a full IK solution for this. But you can see how it's twitching, which isn't really what I want. So what we're going to do is we're going to just adjust it a little bit more, and maybe I'll think of something that I really like. But chances are pretty high that instead of thinking of something I really like, I will simply give up and try something else until I have a little bit of time to chew on it. There's not really a big reason to push yourself to keep banging your head against the wall. If you can't figure out something, chances are you'll figure it out when you are, doing something else, and you shouldn't try and rush it. So I'm trying to figure out which of these vectors is likely to be one that makes it feel realistic. Yeah, Monk of Time is right. It's supposed to follow the tip. And I can determine where the tip is and sort of try and make it follow the tip. See, that wouldn't be too bad if it was properly moving forward rather than kind of floating up. But the problem is it's floating up. I think what I really want to do is, if the range is significant, I don't want to use the slack. I want to use maybe the negative slack or something. So for now, what happens if we just invert the slack? Let's find out whether or not it feels more intuitive if the slack is backwards. Because I don't want it to shoot in from the side. I want it to come up from below. Well, with a negative slack, it's a little bit better. Ooh, that didn't work out, did it? Not really built to have those. Oh, well, I think I actually adjusted it manually to work with the positive slack in the first case. Definitely not. Lux comes in and says, hello. Hello, we're trying to get these tentacles to behave in a way that feels reasonable. Yeah, so that's actually not bad. And you can sort of see the ridges of the suckers. Let's go ahead and adjust the grab point. Here's the tentacle target that we're using. And basically right now it is pointed to the right, and it needs to be pointed to the left because we're using an opposite rotation. So something like that. It's a little bit better, but it's offset sideways. You see, I'm not too worried about making it perfect because this is something that happens in the dark. You can see way more of it than you can when you're actually in the game. And it also happens much, much faster. It needs to be even further left. Getting there. It needs to be even further left. However, I think it actually needs to be moved as well. Let's up the speed a little bit so we can really get a sense of how it's going to look. Obviously, with that high speed, it's no longer giving us the right kind of flailing. It feels a little bit strange. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and divide by the speed. That way, the faster it moves, the larger the bumps in the water that it tries to move around will be. Yeah, it's a little bit better. A little bit of vibration right at the end there, but I'm willing to deal with that later. So that is the basic setup that we've got. We're not playing any animations yet, so it doesn't really feel like we've been properly grabbed. But you can see that this is the sort of thing we're going to be looking at, and then it's going to drag us down into the depths. And that should be, what do you think? It should be pretty decent, right? Let's go ahead and see how it looks when we are doing it properly, just to take a look, because I want to see how it looks in the dark, and whether or not I have to add like a giant body to the bottom of that just to make it so that it feels a little bit less awkward. So we'll just move ourselves back. So this is how dark it is when we get here. This is how it's going to look. We're going to move out over here to where there's a chain. It doesn't actually fire immediately. It fires on the way back. So we're going to be like this, something like that. And then it will fire. So let's turn it on and take a look. Oh, that's perfectly acceptable. I can live with that. All right. So that's all well and good, and we definitely can't tell that there's no body attached to it, so we'll leave it like that for now. We don't need it to be inside of this boss animations package anymore, so let's take it out of the boss animations package and delete the boss animations, because that was something I was trying that didn't end up working. So we'll go down here into animations and we'll clean up a little bit, because we're not using that method anymore. There we are. So we don't need that. Let's just double check. Divert animator is actually defined here. Diversity animations avatar, yeah, so we can delete this. Okay, so we're getting there. We don't actually have the animations that drag the player down. Derelin says he would add some particle effects. Yeah, we haven't even gotten the animations in, so we're definitely going to be using techniques to make it feel a lot more interesting. Some of those are going to be before it happens. There's going to be like a roiling in the deep. A lot of silt will come flying up from deep when you start this machine back up. And then when the tentacle itself comes back up, we will have like a pretty impressive set of... it had better be pretty impressive because it's really the only thing we've got going for us. Pretty impressive set of particles and stuff. Yeah, so I think that's fine. We could definitely see the tip though, if we are looking this high up. So we're going to have to make sure to drag ourselves down using an animation. And you can see that as we get down lower and the light fades, it becomes less and less clear that there's nothing attached. But that said, I think it might still be best if we did have some kind of squid body. So we're not going to create a big one. We're just going to like... I didn't want the... Just open the fucking file, Jesus. All right, so basically the problem is that we don't have anything down here. Oh, so we need to put something down there. And we don't need it to be special or interesting, so we're not going to make it special or interesting. We're just going to grab that lower edge, extrude it down. Oh. Now there is a way to circularize these, but I don't remember how to do it. Let's see if we can find it. No, I can't use space. Is it F3? Circle select? That's not what we want. What the heck? We'll just add a circle. And then we'll delete these. And then we'll just do a join. Oh, that's right. I got a new version of Unity. It went from something something 0.001 to something something 0.002. So obviously it was really critical that they clear all of my favorites. We would not want any of the favorites to survive a tiny incremental update. That would just be making it too easy. You don't want to make it easy on people. Fuck people, right? There we are. Monk of Time says it should be down here under Vertex. I didn't happen to see it, but it's not that important. Let me get smooth it, I guess. The Relin says it's the LTS version. I think both Unity and Blender are currently the LTS version for me. So it'll be nice if this shit kind of stops happening at some point. No sign of that so far. So now what we're going to do is unwrap it. Monk of Time says it's smooth vertices. No, I'm actually looking for a circularize button. It's different, but it's not a big deal. I'll just use an actual circle. It's fine. The last thing we want to do is check and make sure that our paint, our Vertex Paint, is not weird. You can see that it's weird. So we're going to need to fix that. Otherwise, we will get some strange behavior out of this, and we don't want that. So we're going to just paint the entire body section black. Why can't I click on... Oh, that's not... That's light shining rather than any actual coloring. That's kind of annoying. That's fine, though. We'll live with it. Oh, it's in the loophole add-on. Okay, yeah, that's true. I must not have enabled it. Oh, of course I didn't enable it. I got a new version of Blender, so they disabled all of my shit for me. All right. Why isn't this working? There we are. Now, the only issue is I don't believe these are currently bound to any bone, which isn't really an issue. I don't want them bound to any bone, but it is an issue in terms of Unity complaining constantly. So we're going to need to do some weight painting. And the way you do weight painting in Blender involves selecting and then using weight painting. You're not allowed to just weight paint. Don't be silly. And then you should be able to click here and then use a really aggressive brush. Just to, no, you don't want to, oh, we're in, there we are. That's not very aggressive. It's as aggressive as it gets, I guess. So you can see that we're not really getting any mirroring going on here. X mirror. Auto normalize, thank you. All the options changed back to the defaults, which are terrible. Oh, Monk of Time says there is an import from previous version Blender thing. So I'm going to have to try that next time. It should be the default, especially for minor updates. The fact that I didn't notice it existed means that it's not really very obvious, is it? It's on the splash screen. I'll take a look next time. All right. So there we go. Just save that, close it. And now we should have like a bell at the base of our tentacle here. There we are. And what we can do is put a particle effect. Oh, that's not what we want. We can put a particle effect in that bell and along the tentacle. We could actually make it spawn from this object. Let's give it a shot. Oh, it says that it only happens when you first launch it. I'm going to have to wait quite a while then because I don't plan on switching away from the LTS Blender unless something big happens. The way that the version updates constantly screw everything up in both Blender and Unity is making me glad that they have an LTS version, but it's clear that they have an LTS version specifically and solely because everybody is complaining about them not actually doing their job properly, which is kind of sad. You'd think that they would just do their job properly. So up here, we're going to create a new particle effect. And we should be able to tell it to spawn from a skinned mesh renderer. And obviously that's going to be our tentacle. So if we were just to have the start speed of 0, the pow, you can see that what happens is it's right there attached to it. Down here in the renderer, we're going to switch out that for a renderer of our choice. Late sand is probably a good one. And then we're going to increase the size for now. Yeah, there we are. So the idea here is if we set this to be world rather than local, it'll actually get left behind as it moves. Now, none of these are animated. They're not doing anything interesting, but let's just take a look and see. Let's go ahead and create that color over lifetime and set up some alphas for it. There we go. And then we'll just bring that up to let's just take a look and see how that feels. Obviously, we're not going to be turning it on until we need it in the real world here, but let's take a quick look here. Definitely not Lux is telling me how to recover it, but it's way too late now. I'll just try not to miss the option the next time I install a new version of Blender. Well, I can already see them. You can see how that sand is quite bright. So we're going to need to switch it out for a darker sand. Let's go ahead and we could use a multiplicative sand, but I think that would be a little too on the nose. I'll call this late sand dark. Oh, we don't need to do that. Delete. The color is actually built into the particle system, not into the material, because that makes a whole lot more sense. So there we are. Now, let's take a look at it. Oh, sorry. I'm adjusting my chair and not paying enough attention to the screen. Where are we? Ah! Alright, so you can already see that it's not nearly as obvious where the tentacle is. I do have sun shining in my eyes, so it's a little bit... I think that's it there. It's a little bit hard to see just because I got sun in my face, but let's take a look. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, so the problem is that if I do it in world space, it gets left behind because it's moving so friggin' fast. For now, we'll just put it in local space and try one more time. This entrance ends up going right up your butt, so I'm not sure that I want it to be like that. We'll have to think about it. Turn on. Yeah, so it's not perfect by any means, but I can already tell that this is going to be fine. Particle system still needs some work, obviously, but the basic idea here is pretty sound. The tentacle will grab you and drag you into lightless depths, so you're not going to get a good look at it. The only thing you're going to be able to see is what your light can reach, and that's going to be like that. So there's not really any big rush for me to make it super, super nice all the way out to the edge of the earth. Yeah, so we do have to program the rest of it, dragging you down and all that jazz. We'll leave that for some other day, though. I'm a little bit burned out, but I don't really want to stop yet. If I stop now, it'll be really, really short. I haven't even reached the part where I'm supposed to start yet. I normally start at 3:30. Normally being relative because, in fact, I haven't started at 3:30 since everybody started to work from home. I got out of work at 2:30 most days, on Wednesdays that is, and then it would take me an hour to get home. So now that I don't have that hour to get home, I can start at 2:30. Anyway, this is one of the things that we're missing. Thank you, Unity. Your long-term support version still hasn't fixed that bug. We're missing this thing. It's a placeholder, not very good. And this thing over here needs to be redone because it is also not very good. I think what we're going to do when we redo this is we are going to use a blend shape rather than bones. I think bones were a bad idea and a blend shape is a better idea. So let's go ahead and pop this up in Blender. This is how it looks, and you can see it looks just fine. But the issue here is that our bones are kind of not working out. So we're just going to delete the armature entirely. And there we are. We're going to come down here into this and delete that. So there we have it. This is how it looks when it is fixed. At least that's how we're going to make it look initially. We might still need to have two bones. So now that I've deleted all the bones, let's bring them back. Woo-ha! So the idea here is that the only thing that's going to be animated is the way the head moves. And so these have to keep up, but they don't have to do anything complicated. Not 100% sure what the best way to do that is, but I think it's going to start by adding in an armature, fairly obviously, right? That is nowhere near where it needs to be, thank you. And then we're going to just extrude the armature up to the center here. We're going to go ahead and turn on render in front mode. There we go. And then we'll bring it forward here. Come on. There we are. And then we're going to delete this guy. Boom. And then this guy, can we animate them as moving without? Yeah, so that's what we'll do. And then when we set up the armature connectivity here, we're going to set it up with empty weights. And the reason for that is because it means that we can set up the weights using math instead, which is going to be a little bit easier for us. I wish that this wasn't so persnickety. There we are. So if we come down here into this, you can see how we've got some bone groupings here that don't make any sense anymore. We're going to just delete all of the bone groups. And then recreate them. So to recreate them, we're just going to quickly just take a quick little nudge just so that we can spell them right. So to do that, we're going to use weight painting. I'm going to select this guy and then just paint there. And then we're going to unselect that guy and select this guy, or paint here. There we go. Bone and bone 2. That is fine. So then we can go into edit mode, and then this can all be bone 2 at a weight of 1. And this can all be, nope, sorry, undo. This can all be bone 1 at a weight of 1, and this can all be bone 2 at a weight of 1. Now if we try to do any animations, perfect. And you can see what's left behind here are all of these cables, and that is going to be a factor. But basically what we're going to do is we are going to punch the cables out. God, Blender is annoying me. We're going to punch the cables out into their own object. And what we're actually going to do is the opposite of that. Oh, I didn't realize this was so many different objects. I guess it's not any easier to do it the other way. Fine, we'll do it the way with the just this. Now in theory we could like hide and mask and all sorts of stuff. But that sounds hard, so we're just going to punch it out into its own object. There we go. Now that it's out into its own object, we're going to hide the other object for a second. And we should be able to weight paint just, oh, that's right, my bad. No, I don't need to do that part. I just need to do a weight paint. Having a really hard time making Blender actually do basic things. I don't know why. Anyway, we're just going to do some weight painting right at the top here, like this, see? That's more or less right. And then we're going to come down here to the bottom and do the weight painting here. And I guess the best bet for us would be to kind of paint halfway up like this. Now we should have auto normalize turned on. Yeah, good. There we go. And now we should be able to use blur and just like blur. We want it to be super, super blurry. For some reason, it's only blurring in one direction, so we'll just tell it to blur in both directions, right? That seems pretty good. So now we will get out of weight paint mode, and then we will unhide everything, and then we will rejoin them. Well, let's not rejoin them yet. Let's make sure that it actually works first. So does anyone know how to, what's the quick key for getting out and into pose mode? Because continuing to select things from here is just garbage. Okay, so there. Now you can see that it works fine. I mean, it's not ideal, but it should be bearable. Yeah, that's all good. No problems. And when it just starts, we'll just see. We don't need the weight. Sorry, the key that we were going to put in. We don't need it because we can just put them. We can just put it like in the right spot, something like this. And you can see that that is vaguely a viable sort of visual, so it'll be fine. All right, so we're going to call that much, much better. Save that. But we do not have the proper thing for catching the device. So this armature, we're going to rename this to, what did we call this thing? Energy relay? There we are. I think I just renamed a bone, which is not what I wanted to do. No, I didn't. So, what is this named? Energy relay. And this is named Tentacle. Okay, that's fine. It might be Control Tab. That certainly gives me a nice selection. I'll probably use that from now on because it's really obnoxious to have to go to the corner of the screen every time. Really what I like Blender to do is if I'm in pose mode, if I'm in pose mode and I click on something that is clearly nowhere near a bone, I'd like Blender to realize that I'm trying to switch objects. I don't know why it doesn't let you switch objects when you're in pose mode. Just be in pose mode for that one thing and then let me go somewhere else. Jeez. Anyway, this here is crap. It's not how we want it to look. What we want it to look like is, I don't know. We want it to feel a little bit organic. It's got to have some energy relay catches. And it has to have some shelves for these drones. Right now we're going with an open shelf variant like this. Having a closed shelf variant might be more interesting, but then you won't be able to see the drones. So maybe the open shelf variant is still the best bet. Yeah. So if we're going with the open shelf variant, then how the open shelves are integrated into the shape of the object is going to be really important. It's going to be the defining, shaping thing because it's such a large part of the object. So we actually have these shelves as separate. These things are not part of the main setup. Let's go ahead and just move this stuff off to the side and then hide it. So this is what I created for the shelves to begin with. And it's not great, but it's probably okay. The only problem with these shelving units is how we're going to make them feel correct on the shape, the overall shape of the object. And right now what I've done is I've created just a stack of 2 of them like this. And that's created a very square shape. So I think what we should do is create the basic shape first and then try and fit the shelves in afterwards. So what sort of shape do we want? Well, I think that we're going to have a bulb on top. Now the reason that I think we're going to have a bulb on, come on, one of those buttons. I think the reason that we're going to have a bulb on top is because that's what's going to catch the energy. So that's going to be our energy catcher bulb. We're going to add in some details later, but for now we're just kind of trying to get the shapes. So once we've got the energy catcher bulb, we want to make sure that it doesn't feel too disco tech, if you know what I mean. So if we're going to do that, then we want to avoid having like a 70s shape attached to it. How about a pair of heavy spiral cables. They come down from the bottom. I like them coming up from the, like a bracing on the sides here. Let's go ahead and just extrude out some bracings real quick. And then if we have something like this, we could bring in some cables. So if we were to duplicate this and then rotate it 90 degrees and then shrink it, and then bring it up. Just trying to sort of get a feel for what we might be able to do. Oh, set to random. Oh, that ain't gonna work. We have to just move it, I think. Wow, it undid my tool settings without undoing what the tool did. That's weird and not very good. All right, so there we are, something like that. A little bit wider. Sorry, my fingers stopped working about 10 minutes ago. I'm having a really hard time modeling stuff for some reason. So if we wanted a shape like this, we could get a shape like this. Obviously, the whole thing would need to be scaled up. Let's go ahead and do that. There we are. But is this shape a good shape for us? I think the problem here is that I don't like these round cliffs that we have. What I would like to do is turn them into more interesting shapes. So if we were to select all of these elements, just here, 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 and here. If I were to do it like this and make sure to just do connected only, you can see that we can create a shape that is a little more interesting. We're catching this guy, and we don't want to, so you know what, it's going to be okay. We can fix that pretty easily. So if we were to do it like this, we could sort of get a good shape out of it, like a... I think we want to do it... Sorry, I'm trying to think about how I want it to look, and the answer is, I don't know. But if we were to take this shape and then flatten it. Not that way. Not that way. No, stop. There we are. And then we could do the same thing on the other side. David Goder says, "Hello, how are you? Well, I'm struggling with basic design concepts as usual." So you can see that this shape has a bizarre number of faces pointed in random directions. Let's just recalculate the faces. Face data, recalculate. Where's the recalculation? I know there is a way to recalculate the faces. Is it new V? What are we missing here? There's not even a way to flip the faces in this directory. Am I hallucinating? Here they are. So add that to quick favorites and we'll recalculate. Yeah, good. So actually all of the faces are backwards aside from those. So we'll just flip them. No, that's subdivide. Let's flip. No, now they're backwards. Flip again. All right. So the problem here is that we're not using a material that has any inside face data, so we can't see what's inside out. Just hello, thank you. So you can see that they are inside out, just these parts. There we go. We have some streaks. Oh, okay. So all right, we'll go ahead and tell it to recalculate these. Normals, recalculate. There we are. David Goder and Monk of Time are trying to help, but there's no helping Blender. So the other thing we need to do is sort of bring this line into parity. So we'll just move it down. And we're going to take the two elements, this bad boy and this bad boy, and we are going to move them so that they are in roughly the right spot. We're obviously going to have to redo, maybe just delete those. Just go with two cables. We could, in fact, go with 4 cables if we were a little bit more interesting. If we were to duplicate these guys and then scale them -1, you can see that we could do it like this. That will probably work best. So we also have the option to undo what we just did, and then take the opposite approach. So, whoop. Oh, thank you. Whole bunch of chat just happened. Let's take a look. Monk of Time says he just started using the search menus. I have no idea where anything is in Blender, so it's definitely not Lux. David Goder says, I made a hair mesh and all the faces facing random directions. Take me 30 minutes to flip them by hand. Don't flip them by hand. Use calculate outside, which you just saw me do, right? It's hidden well, but it's here under normals, every calculate outside or recalculate inside. And basically, we can simply take these two elements here and then extrude them straight down. There we go. So if we take this shape as what we want, we can simply set it up like this. And then these can be stuck on that edge, see? So if we wanted to, we duplicate, move the old ones away, and then we can, this here is not mirrored, so we're going to have to apply the mirror first. There we go. And then what we'll do is just merge them together. Boom. Once they're merged together, we should be able to select them. Oh no. Okay, so we're going to unmerge them. Because it turns out that they're not properly wired up. So we're going to properly wire them up before we go any further. And properly wiring it up just means that when you press Control L, you get everything that you need. There you go. That's good. So I'll hit apply. I'll move it in. It looks like we're using a smoothing factor that's not correct. There we go. Definitely not Lux says, whatever this is, it looks fancy. It's a drone station. So I'm not really sure how I want it to look, but I do know how I don't want it to look. I don't want it to look like that. So yeah, something like this should be pretty reasonable. If we take this lower bound and we move it down a little bit, we should be able to cut. And we should just be able to literally chop out these faces. Now, we're not able to mirror this due to the spinny bits on top, but we could always, if it becomes an issue, we could always take the spinny bits out, put them into their own object, and then set it up as a mirrored object. Which we'll do if it, you know what, that seems like a really good idea. So we're going to just select these spinny bits, punch them out, and then we're going to chop this into quarters. I punched them out, right? Yeah, there we are. So if we switch this to point select and then doop. Yeah, there we are. And then doop. Perfect. Now we should be able to tell it to mirror. There we go. Now we shouldn't have anywhere near as much filling to do. So we're going to just start to merge these in properly. And you can see that that goes back in kind of a strange way. I think that that might work, but we're going to have to move the whole thing forward first. No, not that far forward. Yeah, it's a little bit better. Come on, thank you. All right, let's set this up. Now we've got some faces that we normally don't have, and that's going to be a little bit of an issue. You can see how we've got a cut back like that where we don't actually want that. It's just not part of our current imagining, so we're going to delete it. And we're going to do the same with all of these side elements, I think. There's no real reason to have them. They are invisible. Oh, I deleted too much. Sorry. Hold on. The sun is coming through my window. I think most people who watch me are in Europe somewhere, and they don't have the sun at this particular time of day, because I've got it. Boom. There we go. That's a little better. I definitely lost some faces, but that's fine. We'll bring them back. All right. There we go. So now we should be able to get this thing at least vaguely in line with what we want. And we definitely have some really pretty grumpy setups here, but that's not too shabby. I mean, it could be a lot worse. Just put in a cut here. We could merge those, but I think we're just going to put in another cut. David says it's almost midnight where he is. Yeah, that'll happen when you live on the wrong side of the planet. I don't think I need that one. Okay, so we're going to delete this. Sorry, I'm trying to get this to be the same on both spots. Come on, let me select the things. Jeez, there we are. Not edges, faces. There we are. The Rellin says, the Monk of Time says it's only 3:30 where he is. That's because you probably live right next to me. And the Rellin is upset that I said he lives on the wrong side of the planet. Well, I would, in fact, be hard-pressed to describe anything about the Western Hemisphere, especially the United States, which is even slightly better than Europe. So I can't back up what I said. All right, so you can see that we've got these gaps, and I don't really know what used to be there. Let's take a look. Here you can see what the gaps were is... I must have deleted the back half. No? I'm not really sure what we deleted to get the missing elements like that. That's... There we are. Well, we'll figure it out and fill them in. Anyway, the basic idea here is that these gaps are no good. These little pieces that are right here. And I think that we can simply fill them in. I don't think we have to worry about it too much. So if we select and then extrude Y, there we are. We didn't put on clipping. That should close it. And we'll do the same thing here. And for this part, we're just going to start to fill in the gap. Here we are. Oh, we've got some free-floating points back there for no reason. Just to fill that in. And then we will extrude this up. And then fill that in. And then down here we'll do basically the same thing. Them is the basics. And then what we're going to do is mark these as smooth. More or less. We're going to need a base of some sort because we can't do without one. And the basic idea here is that the base is going to be... can we do a... I guess we can't. That's fine. We'll do it manually. The base is going to be the place where we mount the ropes. So, the chains in this case. So we're not going to bevel the entire set because we don't want to. We're going to bevel part of the set like this. And then over here, we're going to create just a handle set so that we can, put a chain around it. More or less. I guess I'll have to bevel that one too because we can see it. Bevel here. And then in an ideal world, this face will have some kind of decoration. But I don't know what I want the decoration to be, so we're going to leave it for now. We'll come back to it later. Anyway, we're going to be using a UV map. Let's just use a smart projection here. Shaboom. And then over here, we're going to grab these bad boys. We might as well go ahead and smart project them too. Why not? And we're going to have to apply the mirror and then move these boys back in. Shaboom. And obviously, that's going to have to be shade smooth. We're not quite done because we've got some crap left on the top here. But I think we'll try just sealing the faces for now. We'll come back to it. Now you can see that we've got this like hip. So we're going to try to deal with that hip in a way that makes it more interesting. The hip dates back to an era in the design of this when it wasn't strangely saddle-shaped. So if we pull it out, we might be able to then create some sort of visual element that will enhance it. Oh, too much. Where's the merge? For fuck's sake, why is this so annoying? Merge. Thank you. It's under mesh? It's a vertex operation. Why is it under mesh? Oh, great. So when you are searching for it, you can't right-click on it and make it a favorite. Isn't that fantastic? There it is. Where's the at last? What happened to merge at last? Now there's only at center and at cursor? Do I need to do collapse? Why is this long-term support version of Blender completely different than the version of Blender that was like 0.01 versions earlier? David Gooder says he's going to model an animated paper airplane soon, and Monk of Time says he had to do something similar. This really shouldn't be this challenging. Why? Man, you remember back when you could do stuff in Blender? Merge. Look, at center, at cursor, and collapse. What happened to at first and at last? Do I need to have, hold on. I bet I need to have a point selected in order for those to show up. There it is. Jesus. All right. So, it doesn't look quite right just yet. That's fine. We will make it look better by using inset and then extruding those faces. Nope, I hate it. It's all terrible. Undo. I guess that's the farthest I'm allowed to undo. So we'll just go the opposite direction and cut in here. So the idea here is that David Goder says, I wanted to bring it into Unity with blend shapes for a casual game. Sure, you can do that. Animations, baking animations into blend shapes is not impossible. I'm not 100% sure of how you do it, but I know that I've looked into it and it wasn't impossible when I looked into it. So let's do a little bit more beveling. There we are. And then we can do some cutting. With the idea being that at some point in the past, this was like crane dropped. So the central piece has a handle on it. Yeah. Now what we want to do is do some creasing. Just UV mark as a seam? No, as a crease. I want a seam. There it is. Mark sharp. There it is. Add quick favorites. Mark sharp. And we'll just repeat the process. Mark sharp. Look at a little bit of stutter here. You see that? Well, for now, we'll just leave it. The other thing we need is the mounting brackets for these. Now, one of the issues we've got is that these are not, in fact, dead on. So we're going to have to make them dead on so that the mounting brackets won't be off center. They just got dragged a little bit when we were doing our initial setup. So we'll just drag them a little bit back. Let's go ahead and trying to think about exactly how to do this. I think we want to make it like that. And then we want to delete these verts and then re-extrude them. And then we can bevel. That unfortunately means that our UV mapping needs to get reset to whatever. Mifa says, what is there, like a giant? Is there a giant race in your game? No, I mean, it's just a huge crane. It's you bring these things out on ships the size of oil tankers, and you've got these giant cranes that can lift and drop things into the ocean. So that's where this comes from. It's not a mythical species. It's just giant cranes. So what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate these and then extrude them. Oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Let's undo all of that. We're going to do it on one portion, not all four. And then extrude that. There we are. We're going to want to make sure that that is median. There we go. And fill that. And then we're going to want to make this extrude it up a little bit, and then, nope. Oh. There you go. Something like that. Bevel. To give it a little bit more life, let's go ahead and bevel here and then extrude. Give it like a connection, and then over here and over here we can extrude. There we go. Yeah, that's starting to look okay. And we're going to want to put in a little bit of a hook over here too. So extrude that up and then bring it over on the y-axis. We'll just take these elements here and slide them on up, and then we will just pump this up. Yeah. The last thing we'll do, that's not what I wanted to cut. The last thing we'll do is cut here, bevel, and extrude in. Yay! All right, so if we then just bevel here, yeah, okay. So now the last thing we've got to do is grab this thing and duplicate it, and then we go over into 3D cursor and rotate it 90 degrees, and then select both of them and rotate it 180 degrees. There you go. So this is more or less what I want. Only problem is that this ball on top isn't really ready for prime time yet, so let's make it ready for prime time, which we're going to do by giving it a hat. And basically, we are going to want to add in some decorations on top of this. So extrude up. And we can even give it a handlebar, just like the main object, because they would have been brought in separately anyway, right? David Goder says you should add some radio waves. Yes, I definitely should. Good catch. And I'm going to just thin this out because it's a little bit too thick. Sorry, I've fallen silent. I'm just doing clicky things. So you can see that the inside of this loop is significantly smaller than the outside. That's not going to stand. So let's shrink the outside. I think that's better than inflating the inside. There. And then we can hiccup directly into the mic a couple dozen times. I think that's the key. Oh wait, I have... Yeah, I forgot I could do that. Cool. Just bevel, and then again. Don't like how that looks. Undo. Now the inner one's fine. We'll leave it like that for now. We'll come back to it later if we decide otherwise. So the radio waves, I think we should bring them in from here. I think that's going to be the best place for them. So we're going to add a cube. And then we're going to... Ooh, let's not do that. There we are. So if we wanted to, we could then just bevel the cube into an octagon, which is plenty. And if we want it to have some cross beams, let's do that before we bevel. So we don't want this to be symmetric because the whole point is, that wasn't right. The whole point here is that we want to break the symmetry a little bit. So we're going to just offset these. There we are. And then when we bevel, we'll probably redo this antenna later once we have a better idea of how to make it look like we want it to look. But as a stand-in, I think that'll be fine. The other thing we have to do is just create a mounting bracket. You know, maybe it would look better literally just attached to the side like this. The plate might just cut it. The plate? I'm not sure what you mean by the plate, sorry. Well, there's lots of other things we could do, but I think that that's much better than what we had before. So we're going to delete this one, the drone bay, and name this one the drone bay. And then I guess we have to completely unwrap it from scratch. It's going to end up looking like garbage because there are several materials that need to be added in. Currently we're using metal. We're going to need glowy as well. Exactly how much glowy we'll need will probably depend on how it ends up looking later on. For now, we're going to add in that as glowy, and these are also glowy. And that's just to get it started. We have this interior element here, which technically isn't incorrect, but it looks a little strange. So we're just going to make it into something a little more approachable. There. Now over here, that's not going to have a UV map, but that's okay. We're using mostly world space effects. Over here we can see how it looks, and you can see that kind of got the materials backwards, but that's okay. Just, there we go. And we can then just drop that hologram warning. There we go. As you can see, the chains are not exactly attached where they should be, but they're not as far off as you might think. So if we move this drone bay, where is this? It's obviously, it's not the sample scene. Oh, there it is, drone bay. If we move the drone bay, we can try and get that. Okay, so I think maybe we have to shrink it a little bit. It's just a little bit large. Should be fine though. And then we can just move it into place like that. And then this side is much easier to reattach since it's mostly loose elements. So we'll just Oh, David Goder says to make it a plate instead. Yeah, I mean, I could. I'm not too concerned. I don't want to have things that might be mistaken for a power receiving dish. Since you're firing a power dish, I don't want the player to aim for something that might be mistaken for another dish. Which is why I decided not to do that in this case, but I mean, I could change my mind. I don't have too many concerns of that. Why can't I get this? Oh, it's nowhere near being on the right plane. There we go. No? Unity really isn't helping because it keeps trying to change the direction I'm pointing with the camera, I mean, so it's hard for me to tell depth. Is this a standalone? So what we've got here is this link and that are actually connected. I mean, that's silly, so we'll just drop this out for a second and try and get this to be a little bit more easy for me to arrange. There we are. That's going to be close enough, I think. Yep, that's fine. All right, so let's take a look at it, see how it looks. Obviously, we've got these really aggressively flat regions, which aren't exactly what we want, but we're just going to see whether or not it is the right shape. And if it's the right shape, we can then start to flesh it out some other day. I don't need to worry about fleshing it out today. I just want to get the shapes working first. I think there's technically a drone like embedded halfway in it or something. It's just we're gonna have to work on it. Yeah, that's pretty good. So the glowy top ball takes your eye immediately, which is what we want. I don't know what we're going to add to this edge. Maybe we'll just add damage, like we'll rip it open. Obviously that drone shouldn't be floating. It should be in the bay. It's fine. It's fine. We'll figure it all out. Over here we've got the object in question. It's completely busted now. I'm not sure if we didn't refresh it properly or what, but that is not how it's supposed to look. That's fine. But the idea is you can see the glowing orb from here. See that? So my hope is that the player will figure out rather quickly that they need to aim for the giant glowing thing. One of the other things I could do is I could damage it. Since this is on these cables supporting it like this, I could simply twist them so I could make this face however we want it to face to give it the sense that it's been banged up. We can do that later though. There's no need to worry about it right now. Yeah, so just, you know, as a starter, this is a much better shape than we had before, and it's also got a very clear target. So I'm not unhappy with it in terms of its shape. There are definitely a lot of things left that need to be done, but, you know, starting to get there. Well, I think I'm going to stop real soon here. Got any questions? This is pretty much your last chance to ask them. Let's see if we can... There we are. I'm just kind of taking a look at this and seeing whether or not... Well, I'm going to take just like 2 or 3 minutes here and create a damaged version of the drone bay. So this will be intact. And we'll probably return to that later because the damaged version is going to be a little bit silly. But if we take some of these edges here and we can just remove them or we can insert them. And then we just do a quick little, not a bevel, but a subdivide. Oh, that's already in quick favorites. Cool. And then what we can do is we can turn on noisy motion like this. And then we can just grab and move points around. And then once we've done that, we could add some more creases and cracks just to make it feel a little bit more, you know, correct. So we could cut there and then mark that as sharp. And then we could just do the same thing for here. Cut there, and mark it as sharp. And that'll give us some size like that, see? Now the only thing I've got going here that I don't really like is that this is not going to feel like it's showing an interior. So in order to make it feel like it's showing an interior, we're going to grab this entire set of faces and just extrude them. We're also going to have to add in a new material, black. And then we can also add in some bang up elements here. Now, what I really want to do is just add random creasy lines to this whole section because that will allow me to create some harsh creases. So, you know. And then we can just use the same setup that we had before. If we were to undo, no, redo. Dang, it's not actually selecting them. I guess it's fine. And you can see I'm just sort of playing around. I'm not really doing this with any sort of specific goal in mind. I just want to create some nasty creases that show that this thing has been battered around. That one's a little bit too obvious. You can see how dense it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to merge it at last here. Here we are. That'll just decrease the amount of silliness we've got there. And then we can just pull this. No, it didn't work. I want this to be less. There. Yeah, so now it's all banged up. And then what we can do is we can grab this entire top element, switch to smooth, and turn on everything, not just connected only, and not projected from view. Thank you. And then we can simply rotate it. Yeah, if we catch the antenna, it's fine. In fact, let's go ahead and grab the antenna. Turn that connected back on. There you go. And let's just see how that looks in Unity. Because I just want to make this edge a little bit less iffy. So obviously the black material doesn't exist, so let's find it. There it is. Just fill that in. Come on. Why won't you? There we are. And let's just see how that looks, and then we'll stop for the day. It still looks quite flat from our perspective, but that's the thing. Once we're in the game, we're going to get a different perspective, and we're going to have a different light source. So it'll probably look quite different. Oh my, I'm getting really hungry. Okay, that's not as black as it should be. I guess it is. Yeah, okay, that's fine. So you can see that this is clearly something that's been damaged. We'll work on it. It needs a little bit more, the damage needs to look a little bit less cartoony. But the basic idea is sound. This thing was clearly knocked over by something that took a big chunk out of it. We're going to need to make the black a whole lot more black. It's reflecting light, and I don't want that. We may add in some tears on these cables just to show that it took a real beating. But I don't want to make it look non-functional. That's fine. All right, that was fun. Thank you for your time, everybody. I will see you some other time. Saturday, probably. Bye.